Welcome back to LaunchPod. If you haven't yet told a friend about us, this episode would be a great one to share. Why, you ask? Well, you'll have to have a listen to find out.
Hey there, it's Jenn Patterson, CMO at Next Canada. Today I'm really excited to be chatting with Lindsay Lorusso, co-founder and CEO at Nudnik, and Jeanne Beker, style editor at the Shopping Channel, creative director, author, and all-around Canadian icon. Lindsay is an alumni of Next founders, and when she happened to mention that Jeanne plays an instrumental role as an advisor to her business, I thought, well, that's a story we need to hear more about. So let's dive in. How did you two meet?
Well, so my husband is an award-winning environmental documentarian now, but earlier in his career, he was a cameraman and he worked for fashion television. So he knew Jeanne. And when we obviously got into this business of making fashion from waste for kids, she was first of mind, of course. And he's like, maybe I can write her, maybe she'll remember who I am, and maybe she'll, touch base with you, maybe she'll like your idea. So there was a lot of hopes and dreams in that first email. And of course, Jeanne got right back to us, loved the idea, and we set up a coffee date immediately. So,
if there ever was a compelling story, that this is it. I was so blown away by the fact that here are these two women. I didn't realize that they were two gorgeous women at that, but that had been working in that arena, really understanding the whole waste management field and what it was about. Yet they had this creative flair and this urge and this passion to take it somewhere and do something with it. And it just made so much sense. It was such music to my ears. Again, and I always say this, it sounds like such a cliche too. I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me. Obviously, we all love fashion and we all love, the next and the new, and we all, live in this age of excess, and, I think it's changing radically. But I certainly came from that world and promoted the sale of so many things out there. And all of a sudden I started stepping back and thinking, we have to be more responsible. We just have to be more responsible because the planet's in peril. And here's, just a small way of polishing this lens through which we can see the world. And I just thought that Lindsay and Alexandra were casting such a wonderful
So you were already thinking about the sustainability challenge. Right?
Yeah, it wasn't like it was good time. The conversation had just begun. It's loud now, and that's quite wonderful. But it was early stages. But I knew, okay, where is this going? Where must it go?
And that was so refreshing when we first met. You said the same thing, that you were thinking about sustainability. And I think it was serendipitous in terms of timing. And you're right, back then, this was 5 years ago, I think, when we met for the first time. And those conversations were just starting to happen. There's so many terms we hear now, like circular fashion, monomaterials, all of these things that even fashion from waste, that weren't conversations then, which is why we didn't even know if this idea would take off.
Well, when you look at all the big fashion brands that have hopped on board now, it really is, it's a global movement now for sure. You're not cool if you're not involved in it to some degree, all the big brands. H&M has a program that's trying to pay heed to it, or Zara, or, all of the big companies. And when you think of the incredible movement that Stella McCartney started, and she's just been such a champion of this from day one, for such a long time. And it's just inspiring every day. You hear a new story of someone else that's coming up with a new concept of keeping.
And as we were just talking about, what Lindsay's working on is solving a real problem. Today, it's solving a problem for moms and helping them make smart choices for fashion for their children. But Lindsay, we talk a lot about these storied brands now trying to evolve, but you're baking it into your business model. How much of that entrepreneurial drive or wanting to start a company grounded in sustainability started with your earlier days in your dad's company?
Yeah, I mean, my dad will laugh when he hears this, but I think there were two paths. Either I started my own company or I took over his. And I think that I wasn't willing to wait around any longer. I had big ideas. I worked for him for 15 years. And I wanted to jump into that. I really did. And it was the culmination of really understanding how astronomical textile waste was, combined with me having my own young children at the same time, that led to the idea of turning these small scraps of fabric into kids' clothes. So it was kind of, the thought of textile waste was something that was interesting to me, but merging it and having a direction of where to go with it really was inspired by my 7-year-old, who was a year and a half old at that time. And it wasn't really until my second maternity leave that I really went gung-ho into the business. I looked at it as a period of time that I had off from Wasteco that I could utilize to really push that business forward. And that's where it started. But yeah, I mean, I think that I'd always admired my dad starting a company that ultimately is doing good as well, with waste management, waste diversion, a lot of recycling initiatives, obviously. And it was something that I always wanted to do.
Very cool. And then, Jeannie, I know earlier we were talking about your kind of earlier career days. And, for Lindsay, a lot of that was family, what inspired it. And you were sharing some really interesting stories about your early career moments. I think what everyone will know is who Jeanne Beker is, the brand. I think a lot of us grew up with you in our household, but you may not define yourself as an entrepreneur. I certainly would. And again, this is something you were talking about earlier. Maybe just for people listening, we don't hear a lot about your early days or how you landed on fashion television and then grew into a Canadian household name. Can you share some moments?
Such a, it
like,
was
where do we
nothing
start?
that was ever planned. I mean, actually, my last autobiographical book, Finding Myself in Fashion. I mean, that's literally like, I just happened to find myself in that arena.
I feel the same way a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I was just a huge people person and loved people and a communicator, wanted to be an actress from a very, very young age, and started acting professionally at the age of 16, doing, bits and TV shows and films and commercials. Decided I must, go to acting school in New York because that's what all the cool people would do. So moved to New York when I was 19 and studied acting for a year, came back and decided but I should, have an academic background in theater too, because I really wanted to be a smart, well-educated, well-rounded actor. So I enrolled at York University and went into their theater arts program in the performance department. Then after having studied in New York, that sort of paled. It was just like, didn't feel that cool to do. So after a year of being there, I took off. Actually, because I started taking night classes in mime. There was some guy that lived down Toronto that was a mime artist, and he'd studied in Paris. And so I thought, well, this is a creative thing. I'll do this as an extracurricular activity, and became totally enamored with it. I thought, I never liked the sound of my voice anyway. So I thought, mime, that's for me. And I'd studied dance in New York, like modern dance and jazz dance with some really cool people. So I was very into that corporal expression. And this guy said, if you really love this, you should go to Paris and study mime with the old man that taught me. And he, like David Bowie, had been studying with this guy.
Gosh,
I mean, this was like, this is the old man that taught Marcel Marceau. Wow. His name was Etienne Decroux, the father of modern mime, in Paris. So I went to study with Etienne Decroux in Paris. Wow. It was wonderful. It was great. But there was something about me as a full-fledged artist that, I just realized, do I want to starve in a garret? Do I want to do, pantomime on the street corner for, like 2 francs or something? No, I maybe should think about how am I going to monetize this? So I moved back to Toronto and went back to university. And then I had been with a guy who I was, quite mad about, who was doing his postgraduate work in folklore. And he was going to go study at Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland. Yeah. So he said, "Do you want to come to, Newfoundland with me?" And I'm like, "What? Like, what's Newfoundland?" To me, that was the final frontier. I hadn't even really barely heard of it then. So I said, okay, that could be fun. I'll go to Newfoundland and be the only mime artist in Newfoundland, which I was. And then I realized I was giving workshops for kids, and I thought, okay, this is not really going to pay the bills. And while he was busy at university there, What am I going to do? I know a lot about the arts. I'd studied art for so long. Maybe I could talk about the arts on the radio. I don't even know where I got this idea, but like I say, I was a communicator. So I knocked on the door of CBC Radio, and they, for some crazy reason, hired me. The only mime artist in the province of Newfoundland gets hired
to do radio.
To work in radio. And the rest is, so I did that for 3 years. Then the fellow that I was with wanted to do his thesis on something more urban, like the folklore of cab drivers and strippers and cocktail waitresses. So we thought, we'll move back to Toronto. And I had already worked there for 3 years, and I'd been producing documentaries for the network. So we moved back, knocked on every radio station door, like 5 times a day for, 2 weeks straight. And finally, J.R. Wood, a brilliant guy who's running the programming at Chum Radio, hired me to be their good news girl. Serendipitously, it was the same year that Chum Radio had bought City TV from Moses Neiber, and was like, so I right away thought, yeah, maybe this is my way to get back into a visual thing. This is going to be a real multimedia company. And sure enough, within the first year, they sent me over to the TV side of things with J.D. Roberts, one of their boss jocks, who now is John Roberts, the White House correspondent for Fox News.
I've seen a couple of those videos, which are so great.
Yeah, but J.D. and I were like...
We can definitely play 6 degrees of separation.
So let me tell you, this was 1979. This is pre-MTV.
Yeah.
They weren't putting music on television in that way. So we got to just fly by the seat of our pants and interviewing rock stars, really concocting this new style of shooting, this new way of doing television with one-man crews and swish pans, and who cared about proper lighting or the perfect audio, or it was smash and grab in your face television that was really very well suited to that world of rock and roll that we were covering, the rock stars, and it was a great time in music, the late 70s, early 80s. The whole second British invasion, they call it, with new wave and punk, and it was just an incredible. So I rode that. We started Much Music, was part of that, and did another show with Brian Linehan along the way called Movie Television. And in 1985, ready for the next big thing, I thought, what could it be? Fashion. No one's really covering fashion.
Yeah.
And there was a fellow at the station who decided to do a fashion video show, and I kind of talked him into doing more than just fashion videos. Let's do interviews with the designers, the way we were covering the music scene.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. We did that show, fashion television, for 27 years. Syndicated in 130 countries around the world. First show of its kind to look at fashion as entertainment. But all along the way, I was never content with just doing one thing. I mean, maybe it was the duality of, the radio, the TV thing initially, and then I thought I better hone my skills as a writer. So I started writing, columns in Flair magazine, and then I started doing a syndicated newspaper column, and I was writing for, through the Ottawa Citizen for the National Post, and then I jumped ship and went over to the Globe and Mail for years, and then I wrote all these books, and then I realized, unbeknownst to me, I realized that there, my name and what I represented and my take on the world and my point of view was what would set me apart from anyone else that was trying to be the next Jeanne Beker.
Exactly.
These people would come up to me, my daughter is going to be the next Jeanne Beker. I went, why would you want to do that? You should become the first, whoever you are. Go get your own job. I already have, I created this job and I'm not letting it go. And so I started really, I guess, branding myself, but not really wittingly, and by that I mean getting my name out there as much as I could. I'm very passionate and I'm still about doing a lot of community work, so being involved. If people would ask me to MC something, host something for a charity, absolutely yes. As long as I was in town, I would do it. So I started putting myself out there in myriad ways. And then the clothing line, because of course everyone was doing that kind of thing too. My name had a certain value in fashion. I felt, and women trusted me. They'd grown up watching me, and why not, put myself out there as that kind of literal brand.
So how was that different though? Because a lot of what you were doing before was building your personal brand, and then you're all of a sudden you're launching this physical product. Like, what was different about that experience?
It wasn't as much fun because all of a sudden you had to worry about things like the bottom line and how many of these things were you actually selling, and what about, and what if the sample that, you had in mind came back looking not right, and what if they didn't want to, buy the entire 20-piece collection that you had helped, create, and they only wanted part. It was just, I started realizing, this is business with a capital B.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like it as much. Just not that there's anything wrong with it. Some people live for that. But I never thought of myself as a business person. I just wanted to be a creative, artsy person.
It's funny though, because I've now heard you say this a couple of times. You didn't set out on this business path, or you weren't considered entrepreneurial. Like, listening to you talk, you embody entrepreneurship. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Lindsay? Like, I think of like, you're a risk taker, you're fearless, you don't take no for an answer, right? Like, you've pivoted so many different times.
But I think an artist has to be that too. Yeah. So, I mean, okay, then we can talk about maybe the art of entrepreneurship.
Art of business,
the art of the deal.
Exactly.
That's my dad. We won't go there. But, I guess, I just, for some reason,
I'm not trying to label you.
The arts,
to be clear.
The arts kids and the business, it was always like art and commerce. And, it was people that were the cool, creative, artsy people, and the people that were the, kind of scary business people that were, meant business. I don't know. So I never thought of myself in that camp. But of course, you have to run. If you're going to make a living doing anything, you've got to see it through that lens. So eventually.
And I see that about you is just you came to the points a couple different times where you realized that the art wouldn't necessarily give you any monetary gain. And then you made a decision to keep kind of forging on. So even in the back of your mind, it was probably this decision that you could make art and still make a living too.
Yeah.
Maybe unconsciously.
I used to say, I sold out, I was always like kind of making excuses for myself, because I feel, if I really would have pursued my absolute heart's desire, I would have been I wanted to be like the next, Sarah Bernhardt. Like, I wanted to be on a stage actress. I wanted to really do the purest thing, mime. It was so pure. There was nothing but you and an audience. You didn't need words. You didn't really need much of a costume. You didn't. It was just about pure expression. And everything, sort of gets watered down when you start trying to appeal to more people and try to make your notions just more commercial. And so I felt like, I sold out. What do you mean I'm working for a top 40 radio station? I should be, on the stage of the Paris Opera.
Exactly.
Not necessarily singing
well,
opera.
I would come see you if you decide to do that.
I want to see
think you'll get a lot.
Okay. We'll save that for later. I know. I used to be a mime, and now I never shut up. I'm making up for lost time.
I love it.
I mean, so looking back though, do you have regrets, or you just kind of rode the wave? And
I've had a pretty freaking great life and continue to. I can't. Regrets. I should, maybe if I would have done this, I could have done that. My only regret is maybe that I didn't believe in myself even more than I did. I always tried to be fearless. That was my parents were Holocaust survivors. My dad was always saying, don't be afraid and never give up. So I was pretty fearless. I was very tenacious. But maybe I should have dreamed bigger. Maybe I could have gone for things that I was, a little insecure about going for, because I didn't think I was good enough or up to snuff. But, I managed somehow to carve out this pretty incredible life for myself.
Seriously.
And I've just had such a great ride. And it still is such a great ride. And so much of my hard work, and the labor that I put into all those years, like the fruits of my labor really, just so exquisite now, because I have this wonderful lifestyle between the city and the country. And it's all because I worked my ass off. And that's a whole other thing when you talk about the motherhood thing and how do
Yeah.
you balance that when you're in
It's
the
a
same
conversation
position.
I try to have
Yeah.
too with young entrepreneurs that
Yeah.
are starting families, women especially, is it's a hard balance.
You do have to give up stuff, no question.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think you can have it all. And maybe not
Yeah.
all at once, but like I cried myself to sleep in hotel rooms
Yeah.
around the world, you know, me in this so-called fabulous, glamorous life traveling
Right.
around. I mean, I really didn't want to go 90% of the time.
Yeah.
But I had to go but now I'm glad that I did that because now I can really pick and choose what I want to do now. And my kids, I can really support my kids in so many ways and, you know, and help them financially if they need it and really have the life experience to help, you know, guide them and inspire them.
And I mean, you're now you're paying forward a lot of those experiences, and knowledge is knowledge. I look at your relationship with Lindsay. I mean, what are some of the things that you've learned
I
from
wish
Jeanne?
I could. I wish I could give more
No,
value
you're
to you.
fit. Well, I think for you, with this incredible network and your experience, you know, the things that you've done for us might seem smaller to you, but for us, they're monumentous. And I think looking at you and the fact that you've raised two daughters, because I follow their work through you, and I think they're fantastic. My mom's seen your daughter in the Coburg Market and things like that. But, you know, and the balance of being close mother with your children too, which is super inspiring, and have had this, you know, incredible career. You know, for someone who does balance that juggle daily with two young kids and the startup, you know, those are the examples where you know you're headed for something that pays off in various ways. So, I mean, it's very inspiring. And I think it's important for young women entrepreneurs to have other women entrepreneurs as mentors, because it is a different set of challenges that come. And I think we can't be blind to that. We have to encourage even these types of open conversations so that, you know, when we feel when we're crying in those hotel rooms, or we've had to miss, you know, putting our kids to bed one night for something else, you know, we can reflect back on that and know that ultimately it gets us to a place.
It helps when you're passionate about what you're doing, right? I think that's a common theme that we hear is when you're trying to come up with the problem you're trying to solve or want to start a business, make sure you do something that you can feel really good about every day. So whether it's building your own personal brand and expressing your creativity, or building Nudnik for you, Lindsay, I think what I understand is that passion gets you through it. I mean, for you, where was that passion born from? Obviously, you know, you've got the family business, but we talked a bit about starting Nudnik, but what is it about the sustainability piece that gets you fired up?
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple different things. I think the first thing is that I really believe that today business needs to start from a place, like you said, through the lens of sustainability. And I mean, I think it's just, you know, protecting the people and the planet and being able to be creative and create products or create experiences through tech or what have you, that ultimately don't take away from the health of people or planet. And I think raising young kids in today's world where we're inundated with climate change and climate action, and we don't necessarily know what the future holds in terms of the planet's health and our health as a species. So I feel like what drives me every day to not just be paralyzed in fear is to be able to work on something that is giving back positively as well, or being an example of something that is positive. So I think I'm definitely passionate about that. Like I said, my husband's an environmental filmmaker. You know, in our household, there's a lot of conversations about climate change and activism, you know, so we're very much both passionate about doing things that are meaningful in that way.
And then how did you think about monetizing, right? Because I think, again, something we'll hear, and to be clear, you know, a lot of the ventures looking to come into Next Canada this year, I'd say over 50% of them have an element of sustainability, and they're not positioning themselves as that type of business. Or like, it's just table stakes today. But we often say, okay, if you want to scale your business to have a global impact, you're going to have to create a revenue stream to continue to grow. So, I mean, was that ever something that caused you to take a beat, or, you know, how did you navigate the balance between sustainability and profitability?
It came as part of the journey. So when we started, it was almost like a think tank. Like, we saw textile waste in the world of waste management, and textile waste is similar to plastics. Like, they're very complicated to recycle. Plastic bottle, for example, is a type of the plastic is different from the cap. Everything, even if it's a different color, it has to be separated. So in all the amount of plastics that we're creating globally, it's such a challenge to recycle it because there's just so many different variations of it. Textile waste is the same. Either you have a synthetic fabric or a natural fabric, and those two separate fabrics can be recycled differently. But when you combine them, it makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to recycle. And the majority of our clothing today is a mixture of synthetic and natural. So we had, clients through the waste management industry that were generating textile waste here in Toronto, and it was all going to landfill because it wasn't able to be recycled. So Nudnik really started off as this idea between my twin sister and I, who was also working for Wasteco. How can we take this textile waste, or can we capture it here in whatever form we may want to work with and turn it into something new? So give it a second life. It was that think tank. We worked with designers. We got their end of roll materials. We worked with print shops where they would give us sweatshirts that they'd misprinted that were just basically going into the garbage. And we'd chop around those logos because we couldn't use those, but we'd salvage the fabric. We were buying 100-pound bales of gently used adult-sized T-shirts and sweatshirts, laying our little pattern pieces on them and then cutting and assembling them into new garments. And so all of this whole process was using different forms of textile waste and turning it into collections. And through that experience, we realized, that in meeting people like Jeanne or getting into the Joe Fresh Center for Fashion Innovation, was that people liked that idea. I think it was really timely. I think it was on the verge of being super timely, but people were interested in that. So that propelled us to move forward with it. And I think when we started to truly think about scale was when I came into the Next Founders, Next Canada program in the summer of 2018, because there I was forced to be in a room full of founders that had already had established businesses that were getting or already at specific scale and scaling even further than that. And we were doing well. We were making small capsule collections from those various forms of waste here. But it wasn't a sustainable business model in terms of really moving that business forward in a global way. So it forced us to step back and really say, okay, textile waste is certainly not a Canadian problem. We love Canada. We're from here. We will always be making from here, designing from here. But when we wanted to make impact, we had to look at textile waste in larger forms to be able to put out a product that was actually scalable. And so we started looking at other forms of textile waste that we hadn't considered here. And off-cut fabrics was one that we landed on for a few different reasons. So off-cut fabrics are essentially the remnants of when they're cutting out pattern pieces from large-scale production. So there's always gaps in that fabric. And that fabric always ends up either in landfill or burned. There's some, secondary markets for it in different local communities, but there's so much of it that a lot of it does end up in the garbage, landfill, or burned. I think there's a stat, the industry creates enough of this off-cut fabric or cutting waste annually to give every person on earth 6 adult-sized T-shirts every year. So it's just astronomical. Yeah. So even if we get better at minimizing, the amount of fabric that we actually put into new clothes or end of roll, for example, and even if we get better with our post-consumer clothes, like we donate them or we keep them in rotation or more people buy secondhand to keep them out of landfills, there's always going to be cutting waste because we're still cutting from rows of fabric. And our pattern pieces are all different shapes. So there's always gaps in it. So we really looked at that as an opportunity to really create a product line that we could scale and continue to scale. So that took us into the idea of partnering with factories overseas. They have the problem, right? They're either it's either an environmental cost because they're burning it, or it's a hefty disposal cost because it costs a lot to put fabric in the landfill. It's very heavy. So we partner with factories now where we turn that that off-cut fabrics into our Nudnik clothes. So it's really a win-win for everybody.
I love it. And I love that, it's true because before we were saying you're more of your waste management roots really come through. Like you've really thought of this as a business in sustainability, and the fashion piece is kind of an offset of that. Yeah. I love your perspective, Jeanne, though. You've worked with so many or gotten to know a lot of established brands and some of the bigger names out there, and they're much more established, right? So they're now trying to kind of catch up with the curve and consumer sentiment and reduce their carbon footprint. I know you've also spoken on the topic. Like, what are some really what's some really tactical advice you would give to more established businesses as they think about creating a more sustainable business?
Well, I mean, I'm not really in the position because I'm not an expert on what one has to do in order to, make your business more sustainable. But I do know that people are starting to think about things a lot differently now, and especially, the younger kids, but even people, I think in my generation that have witnessed so much excess and now are thinking, what do we do with all this stuff? Do we really need as much to get by on? And we're always going to want something new and something that's going to excite us and something that's going to maybe take us in a new direction. But maybe there's another way of achieving that. So, I mean, that whole idea of buying secondhand is, I never thought okay, vintage is one thing, like, okay, well, that's fine because you're buying something that's like, decades old. And, this whole idea of designer resale, which is such a huge area now. And I never thought I'd even look at something that, used clothes. Like, I mean, I grew up, my parents never really had a lot of money as an immigrant kid. I was always having, like, my rich cousins in the States would send us boxes of their cast-offs. And, okay, that's what I'd wear. So it was a real luxury to have something new. Then my mother got a sewing machine and made all our own stuff. But now, I mean, those ideas that were like, paled in comparison to what it felt like when you could go into a store and buy something brand spanking new.
I'm just smiling because my colleague over here, Steph, I compliment her on her outfit every single day, and she primarily shops at Common Sort.
And so now I'm like, now I'm really appreciating the fact that you can buy something that is gently used for like a fraction of the price. And there's great designer resale stores around, Simon stores. And I love the whole, the thrill of the hunt. I mean, that's become a sport in a way. I mean, I'm not a big fan of shopping sometimes, but if you're going to be let loose in it, even if it's a store like a Value Village or something, like, wow. I mean, my daughters never buy anything new. I mean, everything is vintage. I mean, Joey, especially my youngest daughter, has the best collection of vintage clothing. It's just like, it's almost like gallery worthy, it's just so beautiful. But I'm also really appreciating the artisanal thing and people getting back into making that. My mother used to crochet ponchos for me and knit like these fabulous, she crocheted a little play suit, like a jumpsuit for me with like hot pants, like back that I used to wear to auditions. Like when, it was just such a cool thing back in the 70s. But now, or the late 60s, but now I'm just really appreciating all that stuff again. And my daughters are great craftswomen, and they're making a lot of articles of clothing, and I'm just really, really enjoying that. And I think people are getting back to that, and that's pretty wonderful. How do you though keep employing, it's just like untold numbers of people in the clothing industry if you're going to say no, but you've got to be producing less? Maybe it's a matter of producing things that are just higher quality. I think people are realizing that less is more. And yes, let's buy less, but let's buy better clothes, paying more for them that they'll last much longer, or there's going to be a story there, or some nod to a handcrafted artisanal aspect. I think that's really important. There does seem to be,
I mean, if you think about even fast fashion today, I think a lot of what you're talking about is on the consumer sentiment side of things, right?
Yeah.
Like those brands inevitably need to go where the consumer sentiment is shifting to, and that's why H&M is introducing their more eco-conscious lines. I think the question will be, how do those models continue to evolve given the amount of waste that they produce, and of course balance that with all the jobs that they create globally. I mean, Lindsay, you might have some good pearls of wisdom for more established brands as well on how to reduce waste.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd echo what Jeanne said, which is that I think now people are really starting to use their purchasing power for good. So be it they're in the hunt of finding secondhand, or they're investing in quality pieces that have a story, whether they're made by a community that's inspired them to make that purchase, or what have you. So I think the idea that a consumer's behavior is starting to shift, brands really have to catch up or kind of get on board with that. I think Forever 21 is a great example of a huge, massive fast fashion brand that ultimately went under because I don't think they were doing anything that was kind of appeasing the new type of consumer. My big thing with the big fast fashion companies is that it comes back to the design stage, which is that we're designing, and this isn't just fashion, this is industry in general, we're designing multiples of different products every year, multitudes of different products a year that don't have a plan for recycling or deconstruction to be recycled. And ultimately, I walk into stores with items all over the shelves. And especially if they're not quality pieces, I know that a lot of those are going to end up in landfill just by whatever they're made of or the combination of different materials that they're made of. So I think that's where a waste background really gives me an advantage. But I also think it's something that can be brought on as a consultancy for a lot of these big brands while they're designing, which is what fabrics are you using in conjunction with each other, which might make it impossible for them to recycle, especially if it's a lower quality piece that is not going to have a great resale value, maybe in a secondary marketplace. So I think, I can't say that I would have advice for big brands because ultimately I still think I'm in the waste business. I don't feel like I have the grounds to say that, but I do think that looking at the pieces we're putting forward and getting consultants on whether that can even be recycled at the end of product life is definitely a first step. And I think really making pieces and making a shift towards really making pieces of quality over quantity.
Right. And so, I mean, given who is hopefully listening on the podcast, might be people thinking of starting a business, are there any kind of big, from either of your perspectives today, big gaps in either the retail or, think of the full supply chain, right? From manufacturing to distribution to manufacturing to retail. Like what would excite you the most if a young entrepreneur kind of popped up and said, man, I'd really love to solve this problem and I know how to build it profitably. Like, what do you think that could be?
Well, the whole idea, that whole notion, I was actually, in the process of developing a possible TV show about this, of remaking garments is really intriguing to me. And having places to go to take your garments that you don't want to get rid of, not at all.
Yeah.
You want to keep on, but maybe they just don't fit you anymore. So you have to find a way. Well, that's okay. Many people just go to a conventional seamstress and get them tailored or retailored. But places where you could have ideas that you could be given a way of bringing new life to an old garment that you really love, that you're sentimentally, emotionally attached to, because I really believe in the emotional attachment that we have to clothing. It's a wonderful thing. And I'd love to see people taking some of this old stuff and just remaking it and somehow, giving it new life in that way. And I think that would really save a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. That could be an interesting kind of new area for exploration.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't have the vision of what that item could be. They just have that emotional connection to it, but they know it might be outdated or don't fit them. So being able to go to somewhere where they have a crew or a team of people that can, understand their set of values, their personal style, and be able to help them kind of make that into that new piece that they can start to love again.
Yeah, and I think that whole idea of, customization is something that is really going to become increasingly important to us. I think that it has already to some degree. I think people really appreciate things that are really special and meant specifically for them, and that they're not going to, see everywhere else. Personal expression through fashion has become such a unique kind of act and such a special kind of
it's harder to do too, right? Like I buy something from Zara and I walk down the street.
I know.
And have you seen? There's this. I joke in the summer there was this polka dot dress that everybody had, and there was an Instagram account about that dress.
Everyone had that dress.
Thousands of people, right? So I think it is true. It's like, how do you find other ways to express your individuality and customize? And then on the flip side, there's this whole notion of also the sharing economy in fashion, right?
Yeah.
Like places like Fitzroy Rentals, or where you're renting apparel as well. Like that seems to be a real trend.
I rented a dress for the first time this past summer, and it was a great experience. I got it in the mail, and then I just had to send it back, and it was nice. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting times, and especially in fashion. I love your perspective too, because you saw kind of the beginnings of fast fashion to where we are now.
Totally.
Because when I look at fashion, and even from my sisters and Alexandra's and I start, was that we're twins. And I was such a tomboy when we were little, and fashion was really a way for us to differentiate ourselves from one another. I had short hair, I wore little boy clothes, and my sister wore the dresses. And so you could always tell us apart. And when I look to iconic fashionistas like you and other people, it's always been this idea that you have a personal style. And I think, the fast fashion chains or the Zaras of the world, it's easy to go in there, see a mannequin, and that's what's fashionable for the moment. So if you put it on, you ultimately are fashionable for a very short period of time. But it's not that personal sense of style. So I don't know if there's a business model in there somewhere else where you take style icons and some of the things that they do that, gives them an essence of style that might be different from different people. But it is like, how do we encourage people to have their own self-expression in fashion? And I know there are change makers and icons out there today as well, but I do think it's something like my 7-year-old, for example. My mom made him this purple vest, and he's got the best sense of style of anyone that is in my, I hate to say that, there's a lot of stylish people in my family, but he is like an emerging style icon in our family. And he wears this purple vest that my mom ultimately made for my sister, but it didn't fit, and he saw it in her bag and he grabbed it. And it's a little big for him, but it's this purple fluffy vest with this like silk purple lining. And he wears it to school with his purple headband, and he like matches his things in interesting ways. And, the parents are like, wow, he's got such an amazing sense of style. Yeah. And I'm like, he does. And he's confident putting himself out there in the world, even at 7.5, like this. And I think that's really special. What would break my heart is if someone said, like, what a stupid vest or something like that. But no one has. I mean, he's very, and I think that that's something that we should embrace, is that sense of style and that confidence in that sense of style.
Yeah, and uniform dressing, it doesn't have to be a bad thing at all. I mean, I think it can be quite an exquisite thing if you really get your uniform down right. I mean, my daughter, Joey, who lives in the Yukon, the one that, religiously buys vintage clothes, came here over the holidays with this old kind of men's style herringbone coat and this short little crop sweater and this like really long, she had one long skirt and one like funky pair of pants, both vintage pieces, and these funky old boots, and then she got at Kensington Market, and she wore that outfit like practically every day.
I love that.
But accessorized it differently, or her makeup was different, or I can't explain it. It's just like, it grew on me to such a like that. It just ended up looking like her in the most wonderful, iconic way. And it's like her brand is never been stronger. And to me, in my eyes anyway, I just thought, what a beautiful and easy and effortless way of dressing. When you have a uniform that kind of works for you and you just wear it again and again and again. Like, why I know we're living in this age of imagery that's just, it's so ubiquitous, and it's driving me crazy almost. And I'm, scrolling through Instagram, and here's the outfit of the day, and everyone like something, change it up. Everything's different all the time.
Exactly.
I just don't think at the end of the day it is very chic anymore to always be changing it up too much. Pick some basic, great things that really, look great on you, that you feel really comfortable in, and your journey through the world, I think, will be much easier.
It must be so interesting for you to have witnessed kind of the advent of social media and how that affected fashion, and everyone's an influencer. I mean, I'm sure we could talk about that for days, but I mean, on the flip side, just because we do foster a lot of tech-based startups, what are you excited about in terms of the role of technology and fashion? I mean, I know you look at the Shopify platform, and it's enabled so many D2C consumers. It's a lot easier to get your product into hands of consumers, and they're working on making all aspects of the supply chain more efficient. I mean, from both of your perspectives, though, what excites you when you think about technology and fashion?
Well, it certainly has helped so many makers and so many creative people get their stuff out there to such a broad kind of audience, and that I think is really fabulous and imperative for the survival of any real original thinkers in fashion. So because there's just so much of the same going on, the homogeny was just like absolutely stifling for a while there. So we're really seeing so many different ideas have a chance to really take off and run, and that I think is the most exciting thing.
Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that exposure, building those communities, I think is important, especially for brands who have a story to tell. So connecting with people, creating those communities, that engagement. I also think that what's interesting is the idea of blockchain for transparent supply chains. So with what we do, we're looking into that. There's a great example of a woman named Stephanie in New York who created Queen of Raw. And what Queen of Raw does is it's a platform that you can sell and buy end-of-roll fabrics on. And it's global. So, I mean, the amount of fabric that's being traded on her platform is astronomical. And a lot of this end-of-roll, especially overseas where a lot of apparel is made, just ends up in landfill. So it's addressing one side of textile waste. But with that, she's able to have a completely transparent chain on blockchain. So we're looking into it in the sense that we can be very transparent on who we make our clothes with, what fabric we use, and then all the different points in which it enters to then end up with the customer. I also think what's really interesting that I think we're going to see more of, which I'd love your take on this too, because they say that retail's dead. A lot of these malls are looking for new ways in which to engage customers. And I think that experiences are going to take over. So I can imagine that in the retail setting, a lot of, and some brands have started to do this. I think Canada Goose has at Sherway, they have a part of their store where you can go in and it's a minus.
The coat on.
Exactly. You can actually see how their coats will perform in very low temperatures. But I think this idea of bringing in these experiences that really draw people into retail settings is going to become a bigger focal point for a lot of brands that have stores, concept stores. Even with Nudnik, we love to play around with the idea of what our concept store could look like too. So hopefully that's not in our immediate plan of action, but that might be a game plan in the next couple of years. But yeah, I think that blockchain in terms of supply chain transparency and definitely more retail experiences. But I also think that digital experience online is going to set brands apart too.
Very cool. I never would have thought that blockchain would have come up in this conversation, and I love it.
Well, Queen of Raw, Stephanie Benedetto from New York has put that in my ear a little bit. She's created this really amazing business model, and it's has to do with blockchain and textile waste. So
and now
caught my
just
eye.
Bringing it back again to your business, and I think we're running out of time, which makes me sad because I'm really enjoying this conversation. What is next for Nudnik? I mean, again, we talk about fashion brands in Canada and D2C, and sometimes we hear from our entrepreneurs, well, inevitably I may have to move to the US to scale. What are you excited about building here in Canada? Of course, I completely understand that you would want to be a global company, but is there anything specifically in Canada you're excited about or that you're looking forward to achieving?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% want to be a great example of a Canadian business making products from waste that never end up as waste. And I think setting that tone and being a part of the Canadian infrastructure to do that is adamant in terms of our plan. Yes, we're a global brand in the sense that we make our clothing in partnership with factories all over the world. And we want to sell to customers all over the world. So in that sense, we're very global. But in terms of where we're based in design and our community and network, and where it all happens is right here in Toronto and Canada, and that will not change.
And any new products on the horizon?
Yes. So we launched our Disruptor Tee late last summer, early fall. It's made entirely of this off-cut fabrics in partnership with our factory overseas. and even the threads and trims are end of roll. It's also made entirely from cotton, so essentially it can be composted at end of life. So we don't mix those materials. And that was our...
it's compostable.
Yes, because cotton, it's organic cotton. It's not mixed with any synthetic fabrics, and cotton is from a plant and can biodegrade within a few months.
How cool would it be if H&M just started making biodegradable onesies?
Yeah, I mean,
nothing else.
You focus on the materials, and even synthetic can ultimately be melted down and spun into new fiber. But again, it's that mixture of materials that is really contributing to a lot of the fashion waste problem. So it's called mono materials. Adidas just put out a shoe this past year called their Future Loop shoe, and it's entirely made from one type of plastic. So the threads or the shoelaces, the shoelace holes, the fabric of the shoe, the sole, and the idea is that because it's one type of plastic, it can essentially be chipped down and remade into new shoes. So it is this idea that if we use one specific type of material, again, it goes back to the design phase, but that ultimately can be reused and recycled. But that was our catalyst product. Like that was our, in the new way of working overseas in partnership. And we're coming out with 4 new products for spring. So a hoodie, a jogger pant, a little play lightweight pant to match our t-shirt, and possibly a beanie. The other thing that's exciting is we're also sampling a little denim jean and jacket with a partner that makes denim, 100% cotton denim, no synthetic stretch or anything like that. So again, in partnership. But yeah, so that we're getting together the full assortment, which is very exciting.
Very cool. I can't wait to celebrate your success and keep cheering you on. What about you, Jeannie? What are you excited about?
Well, I'm excited about a tiny little capsule collect, even though, I've had clothing lines in the past and got out of them for various reasons. Sometimes because, again, I thought, what am I really putting into the world? Does the world really need another label quite like that? Let's do it. And I teamed up with a wonderful designer by the name of Jeanne Patterson, who lives in the Niagara region here in Ontario. And she's a very successful retailer as well as a designer manufacturer. And we were doing this capsule collection of sustainable pieces, all made of organic cotton and using some upcycled pieces of denim for trim. And not the only dye that's used is indigo natural dye, so the line doesn't have a lot of color in it. But one piece does. She found some wonderful, and it's all made by a women's co-op in Chiang Mai, Thailand. So it's very, it's a feel-good thing because these women are just great, and she's been working with these women for about 20 years now. And we're also doing some kimonos made of some wonderful embroidered fabric that she found. I'll bring one down.
I'm so excited.
Very colorful and very artful, and so yeah. Well, it's almost my way of keeping my hand in that part of the business. Yeah, so I'm excited about that because it's my way of a real nod to the importance of that kind of production and that kind of those kinds of pieces that I think will really resonate with women. So that's just a feel good thing. But I'm involved in so many different things, including very involved with TSC. Today's Shopping Choice, formerly known as the Shopping Channel, and very much would love to bring more of these kinds of products to our viewers. So, God, we got to get on board there with the children's wear because we're not really doing anything in the children's wear space. Wouldn't Nudnik be a great brand to sell that way? I just think so many people are looking now for these kinds of products and to think that they're out there and especially ones that designed in Canada and it's just a real feel good thing.
I just think it's so fantastic that you're taking that your brand and your voice, and I think you'll just continue to influence that next generation, and it's a great call to action to wrap up on. I think as the podcast scales, you might be getting a lot of pitches coming your way. So look out. And we've opened the door. But definitely, I think for Nudnik as well, setting that example. And again, I said coming in, when I first learned that you were acting as an advisor to Lindsay, I said, okay, this is crazy, but do you think Jeanne will sit down with us? And I think it's just such a testament to you and your personality that you've opened your doors. And for those listening, we're just sitting in Jeanne's living room, and this has just been a lot of fun.
Oh, it's just a joy, but it's just, I often used to wonder, where is this whole thing going to go? I mean, this business is just, there's so much noise in the fashion space, and it was getting to a point of, like no return. And I was, getting worried. And then, and then I meet someone like Lindsay and Alexandra, and just like, wow, like that to me is the future. I just think they have such a brilliant point of view and such an exciting outlook, and such just so much creativity and real solid expertise behind them in that whole, from the whole waste management field, how they grew up, and they're just taking it in such bold, brave new directions. It's really exciting.
Thank you. Well, it's those words that catalyst for us continuing to move forward. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into LaunchPod. We're so proud to be part of this community doing such great things to move our country forward, but our reach only goes as far as your support. So please download and subscribe to amplify the voices doing the hard work to advance Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem.